Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, and welcome to this Global Dialogues webinar at Stanford. My name is Jisha Menon, and I am the Sakurako and William Fisher Family Director of Stanford Global Studies. At the outset, let me thank my terrific team, Kate Kuhns, Kristen Hara, Julie Tatsukawa, Stephanie Pitkiewicz, Donna Evan Kesef. Thanks so much for putting this webinar together. So, Global Dialogues is a program devoted to creating fresh space for fresh thinking about the world we share and for grappling together with the complexities of a global landscape that is constantly shifting. And today we turn our attention to Haiti, a nation whose history and present ask us to pause and reconsider some of our most fundamental ideas about freedom, sovereignty, and statehood. Born of a world historical revolution, Haiti has been long entangled with global forces of power, debt, intervention, and migration. It is continually reshaped by ordinary Haitians, political actors, environmental conditions, transnational policies, including those of the United States. We're honored to be joined today by an extraordinary group of scholars whose work spans history, politics, and culture, and who will help us think carefully and generatively about these dynamics. I'm delighted to turn things over to my brilliant colleague and moderator for this webinar, Professor Rochelle Jean-Baptiste. Professor Jean-Baptiste is the Michelle Mercer and Bruce Golden Family Professor in Feminist and Gender Studies and Professor in the Department of History. She serves as the faculty director of the program of Feminist Gender and Sexuality Studies. She is an award-winning historian of 19th through 21st century West and Equatorial Africa and the French-speaking Atlantic world. Her research interests include the histories of marriage and family law, urbanization, women, gender and sexuality, colonialism, citizenship, and race. I turn things over to Rochelle, who will guide us through what promises to be a rich and urgent conversation. Over to you, Rochelle.
Well, thank you, Disha, for that very generous introduction. So welcome, everyone. Thank you for listening to this conversation. And with the gathering of scholars that we have today, the key question is how can research and the production of knowledge be applied towards innovation and problem solving, pressing social, political, economic, cultural, and environmental issues. And in focusing on Haiti's history, present, and futures, and we have futures deliberately in the plural because the future is not yet known, it really is to think about these fundamental questions of freedom and human dignity and the right of all people to live the good life. So while every nation has a creation history, few are unique in this particular as Haiti. The only country established through a revolution of enslaved and free peoples to establish an independent republic, and the second independent nation in the Western Hemisphere. And while Haiti gained independence, achieving sovereignty or the power or authority of a country to control its own government was a much longer road. And it's important to underline that only in 1825 did the former colonial power France recognize it as an independent nation with a forced indemnity, a payment to reimburse the loss of slave owners that a recent New York Times article estimated to be equivalent of $560 million in 2022 after adjusting for inflation. And also, as the US gets ready to celebrate its 250th anniversary, it's also key to emphasize that it was only in 1862 that the US recognized Haiti's sovereignty. So its political history has been one that's been, and indeed, if you look at headlines today, of political instability, dictatorial rule, occupation by the US, democratic elections at a moment in the 1990s, followed by coups, and since 2021, a suspended state. But as the scholar Gina Ulysses said, Haiti needs new narratives. And so our focus today is to establish these new narratives. And it's so wonderful to have these three scholars. So I'll briefly introduce them. They all have wonderful accomplishments. I'll give you a smidgen of what they have accomplished. We want to right away get to this conversation that's going to be more of a moderated panel where and we're hoping for an organic conversation, and we'll also end with the opportunity for the audience to ask questions. So first we have Les Virginie Belloni, who is an assistant professor of history at l'Université de Montréal, University of Montreal, a scholar at the beginning of her academic career, a historian who wrote a dissertation on the roles of Haitians in Quebec specifically and their engagements with the Duvalier regime. And Les is also the coordinator of the Journal of Haitian Studies, which is one of the two premier journals that focus on Haitian studies. Our second panelist is Greg Beckett, who is a cultural anthropologist and associate professor of anthropology at the University of Western Ontario. Professor Beckett has published a book called There Is No More Haiti, Between Life and Death in Port-au-Prince, and is also the co-editor of a book called The Trio Remixed, the Michel Wolf Trio Reader, one of the most important Haitian intellectuals, as well as has written and published in many public-facing journals, as well as academic journals. And then rounding us out, our third panelist is Professor François Pierre-Louis, who is Professor of International Migration Studies at CUNY, and also at the Graduate Center, Professor of Political Science at Queens College. He's the author of many books, focusing primarily on the immigration of Haitians to the United States, one of which is called Haitians in New York City. Another is a co-edited volume called Immigrant Crossroads, Globalization, Incorporation, and Placemaking, and articles in many important academic journals, including Catholics, the Journal of Haitian Studies, Education, and Urban Society. And each of them have truly innovative research that are bringing these new narratives of Haiti. So let's just start our conversation and hear from them. And the first question I'd like to ask each of you is to give us a sense of what your research is about and the key takeaways you have about Haitian society, history, past, present, or future. And let's start with Professor Belloni, please.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Rachel. Thank you so much for the invitation. Thank you, everyone, for being here. So yes, my name is Virginie Belloni. I'm an historian. I teach at the Université de Montréal in Quebec, in Canada, where we're having like major, like snowstorm, like most people in the East Coast, I'm guessing. As Rachel was saying, I'm also the editor of La Revue d'Histoire Haïtienne, so the Journal of Haitian History. And I do want to emphasize that I have to say it's Haitian history because one of the editors is Caroline Fick, and she's always like, no, it's not Haitian studies, it's Haitian history. We're doing something different for historians. It always makes me laugh because I'm like, I think people know, but she's like, no, we have to distinguish ourselves that way. So I feel like in case Caroline is listening, I have you. I have your back. So yeah, broadly speaking, my research focuses on 20th century Haiti, mostly the Duvalier era, so from 1957 to 1986. And so I'm very much interested in not just questions that relate to state-sponsored violence during the Duvalier regime, but also how Haitians, particularly in migrant communities, have remembered the regime, how distance from the homeland has produced not only very critical ways of understanding this dictatorial regime, but also has created, in some cases, more nostalgic representations of the Duvalier regime. As Haiti goes further in crisis, what I've noticed is that certain Haitians tend to be more and more nostalgic of this era where they felt there was a sense of state stability or that there was a state period. And so that's something I've been very much interested in. I've also been interested in how François Duvalier, especially more so than Jean-Claude Duvalier, has constructed an entire doctrinal world to justify his regime by utilizing the color question, this kind of, if you will, competition between two Haitian elites. And how does that also play out in the ways that people remember the regime? My research often combines our oral history. So I did a project where I interviewed many Haitians in the Haitian diaspora here in Montreal to make sense of how they remember the regime, but also more or less known, intellectual productions by the Haitian community here in Quebec. So from the 1960s onwards, Haitians have been coming to Quebec more and more, just like in the US. Canada had major changes to its immigration laws in the 60s. And so more and more Haitians have been coming here. And as they were coming into the province, many of them took a very critical stance, a very courageous stance in the 60s and 70s against the regime because, whatever you said in public in Canada, could come back to haunt your family that was in Haiti. So it took a lot of courage to do that. So some of the things I've been doing in my research is to really put those oral sources and those more written sources in dialogue to try to make sense of how Haitians have understood the regime in the past, 60 or so years. And so I do think it's important to look at the Duvalier regime. I think, especially when we look at the situation, I mean, the context of the fall of the regime. So that would have been exactly 40 years ago, almost to today. Next week, on February 7th, it would have been 40 years since Jacques Duvalier left Haiti. And I think the context in which he left Haiti helps us understand why Haiti is in this state of crisis right now. I think that there was no real the groundwork wasn't done for there to be a real transition into democracy. And so even though there was a very small period where Jean-Claude Duvalier, sorry, what am I saying? Not Jean-Claude Duvalier, when Jean-Bertrand Aristide, sorry, was elected, it only lasted a few months. So I think making sense of the very last few months and the context in which Duvalier left Haiti really helps us better understand the crisis even 40 years later. So I'm not going to say more. I think I went beyond my 5 minutes, but that's kind of where I'm at with my thinking and my research.
Thank you, Professor Beckett.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me and that wonderful introduction. I'm a cultural anthropologist by training, although I think that to really understand Haiti really requires an interdisciplinary perspective, and I draw a lot on history and political science, so it's great to have this conversation with us coming from different disciplines. And my main focus for about 25 years or so that I've been working in Haiti has been on a kind of study of politics, but looking at politics beyond just the state or government and looking at how politics is lived in everyday life. And I work particularly in a couple of neighborhoods in the capital city of Port-au-Prince, primarily a neighborhood on the southwestern edge called Marizan, but also in Bel Air. These are what might be called popular quarters, or in Haiti, they might be called bidonville or slums, very large neighborhoods that are now kind of the ground zero of the armed gangs who control much of the capital city and perhaps much of the country as well. What I've studied over the 25 years has shifted a little bit because it's kind of followed the crisis as it's unfolded. And I think, as we just heard, in a way, I almost feel like I'm a kind of historian of the present, of the aftermath of Duvalier and the many kinds of crises that have come from that transition that didn't seem to ever transition to whatever it might have gone to. There's been various kinds of political projects. My research has looked ethnographically at a couple of those projects in very, very small scale, and I tend to work in a kind of more intimate scale to think about these national or international questions of what's happening with the Haitian state. I've worked with grassroots environmental organizations trying to make a botanic garden in the midst of Marizan. I've worked with squatter communities who are trying to navigate the gangs and the police and other kinds of groups. And I was really especially interested in the kind of NGOization of Haiti. It's often said that Haiti has the largest number of NGOs per capita anywhere in the world. People cite this 10,000 NGOs figure. No one knows because, of course, they're not really registered with anything, but they do structure most daily life. And I was really interested in what does it mean when the state is displaced into a political form that's called non-governmental, that takes on a kind of ethical but very short-term project-based approach to providing services or infrastructure or the kinds of civic structure that people need in a city. Most recently, I've been really interested in a new kind of structural transformation of the state. I don't think we have great political or great analytical vocabulary to describe exactly what's happening politically in Haiti right now. So that's a bit of an open question for me, but I've been thinking of it as a kind of contrast or tension between the promise of a politics of infrastructure that was the center of the reconstruction effort after the 2010 earthquake, rebuilding Haiti literally in terms of infrastructure, to a shift in what I think of as kind of the everyday logistics as a means of politics of getting around the politics of mobility and immobility, gangs having roadblocks, gangs taking over any kind of space that people might move through, and the kinds of negotiations that people have to do to literally get by or around states or proxy political actors like the armed gangs that have taken over. And that's where I'm at right now, although it's more questions rather than answers coming out of that research. Thanks.
Thank you, Professor Pierre-Louis.
Thank you, Rachel, and the staff at Stanford University for organizing this webinar. Again, my name is François Pierre-Louis. I'm a professor of political science and former chair of the political science department at Queens College. My research basically is on the Haitian diaspora, primarily on citizen participation and transnationalism. One of the interesting aspects of the Haitian diaspora is that its impact on Haitian politics. Since the beginning of the exile period when Duvalier sent the Haitian middle class outside of Haiti for political reasons. You had a small group of well educated and well-connected Haitians with a lot of social capital who were able to put a lot of pressure on the Duvalier dictatorship during the 1970s and 80s. And especially that got more accelerated with the immigrant population they called the boat people who came in the 1980s. So as Haitians began to become citizens, primarily in the United States and Canada, they started to put a lot of pressure on the local government, on their own government in their homeland, in their home country that they are, to pressure the government to be more democratic and make some changes. So over time, the way they have created this process is through the hometown associations. The hometown associations became a bridge between Haitians who live in Haiti and those who live abroad. Not only there became a lot of humanitarian activities that they were engaging, but at the same time they were training local Haitians in Haiti the democratic practices, such as holding meetings, holding people accountable, giving reports, and doing a lot of social programs like school feeding school children, building schools, and fencing the cemetery. So therefore, eventually, although Duvalier at the beginning did not pay much attention to them, but over time, they became very instrumental in pushing a democratic process. Now, Haiti has one of the largest diaspora population in the US and Canada and Europe and the Dominican Republic. But the latest Haitian diaspora that has come up is in South America. Currently, you have a huge group in Chile, in Brazil, and in Mexico. In fact, interestingly enough, right now you see there is no direct flight between the US, American commercial airlines between the US and Haiti. However, you have charter flights going out to Chile, to Brazil every week, and either from Cap Haitien, which is the second major airport, or even from Port-au-Prince. So therefore, the lack of absence of American airlines going to Haiti did not stop other Haitians or other airlines from other parts of the South America to go right now. And one of the things I'm interested in looking at is what is the impact of the Chilean diaspora on Haiti? I was there 2 weeks ago. I got a chance to visit a lot of the Haitian communities in several places outside of Santiago, in small towns in Chile. And an interesting thing is that everyone wants to go back to Haiti someday. At the same time, that was always the dream and the aspirations of every Haitian diaspora to go back home someday. And that going back has remained important for understanding the Haitian community abroad, for understanding their attachment to Haiti, and the fact that how much they care about what they left behind. And at the same time, it's interesting to see also the impact of the Haitian diaspora in creating a common bond, something that they say in French, a sentiment d'appartenance, a sense of belonging. Even though you are in a foreign land, you are confronting several issues, but at the same time, a level of solidarity and support whenever you encounter these issues. So this is what my research is mostly about.
Wonderful. And already in all three of your presentations, I'm seeing three themes come up. So one is the theme of earthquakes or the environment and infrastructure, the built environment or lack thereof, and how that impacts possibilities. The second thing that each of you raised was the question of democracy. Oftentimes when you think about the headlines about Haiti, it's about the lack of democracy, but you're talking about a kind of a homegrown sense of civics, if you will, and citizenship that may not be placed, to use your words, Greg, within a state apparatus, but the idea that civics lives elsewhere. And then the third thing that we'll get to is this question of diaspora. And indeed, I remember in a prior conversation, Greg, you brought up of how Haiti is really at the crossroads of the Americas. So when we think about Haitians within Haiti and also migrating in North America, both in the US and Canada, And Francois, as you brought out this kind of new Haitian, well, there's nothing new about Haitian Latin American relations, but let's say the new version of it in the 21st century and how that's changing the fabric of places like Chile, Mexico, and Brazil. But let's first get to the earthquake, because we just had the recent 15-year anniversary of the really devastating 2010 earthquake, and really just the month of January, which is such an important month in Haitian history. So we all know January 1st, the day of independence, and then also January 12th, 2010 of the earthquake. So just wondering if you remember from your memories, where were you when you heard about it? Were you actually in Haiti? And the ways that the symbol of it has become the way that the Palais National is still this kind of crumpled entity. And what you're seeing now, 15 years past, in terms of commemorating this event.
Hmm.
Why don't we start? Whoever wants to start.
Well, I'll go first because I survived the earthquake. I was there, I witnessed it, and I witnessed the devastation, the powerlessness. I was with I was just about to start a meeting. It was like 4:45, and then the earth began to rumble, and people didn't know what it was. And I was in a building, and I said, "Oh, it's an earthquake. Let's get out." So we all rushed out, and within seconds, the building did not fall, but it was ruptured everywhere. You had cracks everywhere. And the location was in Paco, behind in the mountains, and behind Paco, the building I was, you had a slum area, small buildings, and they all crumbled like pancakes. And then suddenly we saw, people weeping, crying, and then some of people came with their children, all already dead in their arms. And I was around with doctors there. And it was the worst human conditions you can think of. That here we had the doctors, one of them was a pediatrician, but you were helpless. There was nothing you could do. And during the night, you have an aftershock. We had to sleep in the car because we couldn't go in the building, in the hotel where I was. And then the next 2 days afterward, I went around with friends to bring food to a lot of people who didn't eat for a long time. And there are certain pictures, I still have in my mind of memories sometimes that are shocking when you see, sometimes on the streets as I was walking to help some people, you saw some women walking with their child in a suitcase, and they're wandering as if they are lost. Other people had to separate the bodies from the dead, from the wounded, and they were cooking in the middle of the streets. And one of the leaders I spoke to said, "Listen, I just lost my dad. My dad is over in the bodies, but we have to survive, and I'm organizing the cooking for the other people." So, I came back shocked, and I spent a whole month in my house, not even wanting to go outside. And whenever I hear a backfire from a truck, I would jump because that was such a devastating image that I had. And at the same time, it took me a long time to process this. How did we get into that situation where you don't even have a fire truck to help the people? You don't have a crane. The government was totally unequipped to organize to help people. A lot of people would have been saved if the government was better organized. I wrote an article about that, and I showed how the NGOs devastated Haiti to a point where the government depended so much on NGOs. Whatever the NGOs dictated to the government, that's what they decided to do. For example, NGOs and the international community, primarily those who were supporting us, the donors, were not interested in fire trucks. So therefore, the government did not really have a good ambulance system of fire trucks. They created the policy that the government had. However, on the good side of it, the world came out in support of the Haitians. Millions of dollars were raised. And unfortunately, and that's the sad part about the situation that has gotten us to this point today, that because of bad governance, corruption and a lack of impunity, the Haitian people never benefited from all the money that was given for after the earthquake. The opportunity that the government had, or society had to rebuild Haiti, the infrastructure, the urban environment, the support system never happened. A lot of things never really be started and then they never ended because of the corruption and the impunity, and also the tacit support of the international community in supporting leaders who had no idea or no intention of doing anything after the earthquake. I'll stop there.
Right. And I believe, Greg, the question of infrastructure is what your new research is on now.
That's right. And I think just to echo what Francois was saying, I mean, part of it's hard to grasp the scale of the earthquake, but just to kind of put it in context, it's still considered one of the worst disasters in modern history. It's an unfortunate case in which Haiti is yet again world historical in some ways, but it's also become a touchstone case in international disaster response of what not to do. It's hard to overestimate as well how terrible the response was. Although there was a lot of money that did flow in, the capacity to absorb it or the ways that money was handled it caused a lot of kind of possibilities for corruption, let's say, and kind of made things a lot worse. And I think that we live, or we're the present right now is a moment that's really shaped by the post-earthquake context. I tend to think of the past 15 years as the era of reconstruction in Haiti, although I think no one is really talking about reconstruction anymore since a series of reports in 2017 and 2018 revealed the depth of that corruption that Francois was talking about, where two successive governments in Haiti had stolen somewhere between $2 and $4 billion from reconstruction funds. There's a super long way this connects to Venezuela and petroleum and regional politics around energy that I don't want to get into just yet, but I do want to say that I also think it's important to think contextually about that date. There's a specificity of the earthquake. There's a date, there's an event to commemorate, but disasters are, I think, processes rather than events, and they unfold in space and time in very strange ways. You could go back a little bit to think about what produced the conditions of vulnerability that made those houses crumble, what brought so many people to Port-au-Prince, the kind of general history of the emergence of a primate city, why people were pulled there. They were pulled there in the 70s by the economic revolution, so-called, of Jean-Claude Duvalier to work in sweatshops to make t-shirts to go to the US, right? Or for other kinds I mean, it's the neoliberalization of Port-au-Prince essentially that made it the kind of auto-constructed and precarious city that it was. You could even go in a shorter time frame and say in 2004 there was a series of four hurricanes that hit the country and left it weak and weakened the civil defense system. 2008 there was a huge food crisis that had already weakened the ability of Haiti to respond to the kinds of things that happened during the earthquake. There was also a UN mission, a peacekeeping mission in Haiti in 2010 that was, most people I work with call it an occupation, and I think that is fair too. It began in 2004 after a coup, was not well received, and had already helped weaken or destroy the Haitian state before that crumpled symbol of the national palace gave us the kind of that's sort of the end of the destruction of the Haitian state, not the beginning of it. The earthquake is the end of the way the NGO just destroyed the state, the way the international community weakened and hollowed out the state to really block the democratic movement over the past 40 years or so in Haiti, I think. And so the response then was shaped by that. One of the things that I think is really telling, I mean, I wasn't there. I was in Chicago, and I really appreciate Francois sharing his story because I've heard many, many similar stories, and we all have lost friends and colleagues and family in the earthquake at that day or after. But over time, I came to hear a lot of the people that I worked with in Martezan say that the earthquake was just something that happened. It's an act of God. The real disaster, they would tell me, was what came after. And one of the things that came after was the UN mission, in all violation of its own policies, dumping its waste in the largest river system in the country and starting a cholera outbreak. Again, the one of the worst cholera outbreaks in the region. It killed more than 10,000 people in the aftermath. And so the disaster's aftershocks were not just tremors in the ground or the shattered infrastructure or the corruption, but all these other kinds of disaster upon disaster upon disaster. And I think that the earthquake then, while it has a specificity, needs to be kind of nestled in that real dense sense of repetition of crisis and disaster, where the international community's interventions constantly seem to make things worse on the ground. There's a lovely film by Raoul Peck called Fatal Assistance that documents the sort of first years or two of that, how that the kind of international structures that were set up is essentially a trust fund that was set up to manage the reconstruction funds. It wasn't democratic. It bypassed the Haitian state. It weakened the state even more. And it set the state up to do nothing but become a broker for that money, which basically made the conditions of possibility for the gangsterization of the state. The only thing the state does in Haiti since the earthquake is manage the reconstruction funds, and all they did was steal it. I'll stop there. Sorry, I can go back to those things.
Ms. Virginie, do you have thoughts on this?
Yes, well, thank you very much. In many ways, what I have to say, I think echoes what Greg and Francois were saying. If I may share a personal anecdote, I was 18 when the earthquake happened, and I was in CEGEP. So I guess you can guess my age. I was in CEGEP in Quebec. It's basically, I was doing a pre-university degree, so it's what you do before you actually go into university. And I remember vividly not fully understanding on the 13th, so the day afterwards, what had happened, because my original reaction was to think, of course, the Western media is going to make it seem like, it's the absolute worst and Haiti collapsed and whatnot. And I remember I had some family that we couldn't reach, and I thought, oh, maybe this is actually true. Maybe the scale of what happened is worse than what I'm anticipating. I was meant to go to Haiti with my father later that month because we had a month-long vacation, like winter vacation in Egypt. And the company called us and told us we would be reimbursed because there were no flights to Haiti unless you were going back to Canada. You could not actually go in. And that's where it really hit me that something major had happened. And then, well, in the continuation to that, I remember when I eventually came back to school a couple of weeks later, there were posters all over the school to give money to Haitians. And it was done in such a way that we were supposed to be pleased that the student body even cared about raising the issue of Haiti, but it was done in such a dehumanizing way. There was this very famous picture of this young Haitian girl who was in rumbles and her skin was whitened because of it. She was like in this kind of powder, if you will. And that was the picture they chose for the poster. And when a few Black students complained, they were like, "You should be happy that we're trying to help you," which is basically what I had anticipated. So it was a very interesting time, and in many ways, I don't know that I would have become an historian had that not happened, because that was the year before I started university, and that's really what pushed me. I always obviously cared about Haitian history, but that's really what pushed me, because just like Gina Ulysse, I felt like Haiti really needs new narratives, and Haiti really needs to be framed in a different way. What I will say is, as I was watching and feeling very powerless as someone who was in Montreal and didn't feel like she could do much, my after this sense of course, the Western media is going to use this to, once again remind us that Haiti is the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere, that Haiti is a corrupt nation, that, this is just Haitian history, it's steeped in violence and whatnot. I have to admit that I was also very disappointed by the reaction of the then President René Préval, who made it very clear that he more or less gave up and that he was waiting on the international community to step in, and they did, I think we all remember those images of the first Americans who arrived in Haiti, very much reminiscence of, previous occupations from the 90s, but also earlier in the 20th century. So in many ways, as Greg and Francois were saying, the earthquake really exposed the pre-existent state fragility of Haiti, and its very weak institutions since 1986 and even before. Um, I've also witnessed, some moments of solidarity. So immediately after the earthquake, there were a lot of stories of Haitians in Haiti helping one another, but that lasted for only for so long. Eventually, there were many stories of, sexual violence against women and children. And so I think the aftermath of the earthquake is still something that Haitians are processing. And so I think one of the reasons why maybe some people, I feel like the earthquake is not at the forefront of the conversation for some anymore. It's because in many ways, I think people feel the situation today is worse, but I think the earthquake was one of those major moments. And it will take a long time, I think, to fully grasp what it meant and where do we put it in the historical narrative about Haiti. So that's kind of how I see it.
Yeah, well, let's get to the next theme that all of you mentioned, which is the fragility of the Haitian state, and probably the date that epitomizes this is July 7th, 2021. So now we're a little over a decade past the earthquake with the assassination of President Jovenel Moïse in his home in Port-au-Prince. So you've referred to, beyond the fragility of the state, just the lack of the state apparatus completely, its lack of functioning, and the consolidations of gangs as perhaps a new sovereign system, if you will. So tell us a little bit about, what do you think are 2 to 3 key takeaways about that moment of the assassination? And give us, beyond the kind of spectacular headlines of what's going on the streets, to what are the processes on the grounds, on the state, or the lack thereof in Haiti today, and how it's impacting life?
Well, I went first. I'm deferring to someone else this time.
I can start with this one. It's a complicated moment that we're still, I think, trying to process. But I think there's a couple of things that were significant about the assassination. Um, one has been the fact that it still remains unsolved, and most of the key players who took power after have been credibly wanted for questioning, if not outright associated possibly with the assassination. And so it was a real capture of the state by the people presumably who had a hand in Moise's assassination. But I think for me, there's a couple of things that the assassination points to beyond the specific event itself. One is that Moise had been a political nobody, and he was sort of plucked by President Michel Martelly, who took power after the first elections after the earthquake and was promoted by Hillary Clinton, and there was even some machinations to get to make the runoff elections work to kind of really back him, and so we call this a selection rather than an election. At least the people that I work with in Haiti refer to it that way. Michel Martelly is a very famous singer and musician. I think when he got elected as president, he was most famous for sort of dropping his pants on stage sometimes, and he represents an attempt to Virginie, I'm thinking of this question of nostalgia that your work is focused on. I feel like Michel Martelly was an attempt to reconsolidate Duvalierism after the fact. And so he promised to restore the army, and an old kind of politics came back with him. But something new happened too. His political party, which went by the acronym PHTK, it roughly translates as the bald-headed party, which was partly a reference to him and partially a sexual innuendo. But the PHTK had picked Moïse, who was a businessman of fairly marginal means in the north, and somehow linked up with importing, exporting, I would possibly the drug trade that Martelly was engaged with. So you have with Moïse, there's some sort of internal reformation of who actually controls things in Haiti that had to do with arming new gangs. It had to do with the struggle or new kind of signaling of power to the established elite in Haiti, and a reconfiguration, I think, around what I would call the cartelization of a certain elite in Haiti that is tied to transnational trade in guns and drugs. So Moise's assassination looks like a moment of instability, and it truly was, but it was also a moment of a consolidation of that form of power, which has actually used political crisis to stay in power because they can't win elections because they're so profoundly unpopular and have no real attempt or idea to govern as a political party. They want to rule, but they don't want to govern. And I think that Moise's assassination is a touchstone for that shift into the state and the contest or struggle over control of the state, which is basically between a few parties trying to line themselves up for new elections, and armed gangs who have shown that they can make the state useless. They staged a coup in 24 to remove the acting prime minister who took power after Moise, Ariel Henry. And so the gangs show that they can take power, but they don't want to govern. They do not want to take over the state. They could have at that moment, but they don't. And so we're in an era where the state exists as a form of power that extorts, but doesn't do governing, I think. And I think that, so for me, the assassination is a moment that highlights that transformation. And just one other point as well, leading up to it, um, Moise had overstayed his constitutional mandate already by the time he was assassinated. The assassination also is a moment that really should shine the light on the failure of the international community to support the Haitian people who have been mobilizing since 2018 against Moïse and his corruption in really the largest popular movements since the 80s against the dictatorship. And really striking how much the international community has sided with clearly corrupt leaders. They've always done that, of course, but just in the sheer abundance of evidence of their corruption. So I've been thinking of this in terms of extending Michel Rothschild's language of the state against nation, his famous book about the Duvalier regime, to thinking about the international community against the nation, which has sort of both have sort of sidelined the state, and the international community really blocked there's all kinds of potentials for political compromise around Moise before his assassination. His assassination represents the end of those negotiations and the consolidation again of forms of terror or armed groups that have really blocked the ability of civil society to have a say in Haitian politics. Sorry, I went on a little too long.
Yeah, maybe just reacting to one of your points, Craig, about the Parti Tête Calais, especially under Michel Martelly being, in some ways, a continuation, but also very, in other ways, different from the Duvalier regime. I was thinking about, for instance, in the mid 2000, early 2000 teens, rather, I should say, when all those stadiums were being built by Michel Martelly for no apparent reason. This was very much, at least for me, reminiscent of what we've seen with Jean-Claude Duvalier and the Jean-Claude X, which was supposed to be this kind of economic boom for Haiti, but essentially it was very much benefited a very small fraction of the state and the elites. And in many ways, I think Michel Martelly was not shy about the fact that he was very much enamored with Duvalier. When Jean-Claude Duvalier died in 2014, there was talk about him having a state funeral. In his official Twitter account, Michel Martelly even said, beyond our quarrels, saluons le départ de ce fils authentique d'Haïti. Let's salute the death of this authentic son of Haiti. Pretending that for the last few years there had not been families of victims who were trying to who did manage to successfully put Jean-Claude Duvalier to trial, even though there was very little effort from the state to actually maybe proceed with, let's say, a truth commission or something to make sense of the Duvalier regime. So that's absolutely true. But you're also correct, I think, that something really changed with Martelly, with the relationship that eventually we'll see between certain actors of the state, so not just Martelly and the gang members. In many ways, I think we should also think about how these types of relationships change already under Aristide, especially with his second term and the Chimère. I'm a bit uncomfortable with how sometimes people would draw a line between the Tonton Macoute of the Duvalier era, the Chimère of the Aristide era, and in the gangs today. I don't think all three entities are the same and necessarily have had the same type of relationship with the states. But definitely, I think that the situation that we're looking at right now should be understood in a longue durée. Even though the question of drugs, I think it's probably one of the things that makes it very different from maybe the situation in the 60s. Certainly by the 80s, the issue of drugs was starting to be a problem. But I do think that we can draw back on Haitian history to kind of make sense of what's going on today in the country. So I just wanted to respond to that because I do see Michel Martelly as being someone who's very much inspired by Jean-Claude X.
Well, I would just add to what the two panelists just mentioned because I have no disagreement fundamentally with the analysis that you just made. I think the assassination of Jovenel Moïse is basically a consolidation of the oligarchy and also the end of the oligarchy rule in Haiti. As Robert Fatton mentioned, Haiti being a predatory state, you had an arrangement that was made between the oligarchy and the international community to keep the population out. It started with the coup d'etat against Aristide in 1991. That was the only time in modern time you had 67% of the population freely elected a president, and within 6 months that president was overthrown. Not only the president was overthrown, but over 5,000 supporters of that president were killed by a paramilitary force called FWAP. People were brutally killed, they were tortured, and those who were not killed, they were given force one way or another to leave the country. Some of them were given visas by the international community to leave. Others were just bought out, and others were forced to just flee for their lives, because the bottom line was not to allow the population to decide its own fate. It had to be something they were totally against it. So Moise, the culmination of all this situation was the assassination of Moise. But Moise brought in other issues. First, he brought in the consolidation, as Greg mentioned, of drug trafficking. Those people who were mostly involved in drug trafficking became emboldened. They had the support of the gangs. They had money. They had impunity, and they're the ones also who control parliament. So therefore, you couldn't turn around them, because they had total control of the state apparatus. The other thing also that happened with the assassination of Moise is the reinforcement of the gangs. Now, people don't realize that the gangs were reinforced primarily by the international community after the earthquake, when they decided, out of the blue, created a brand new city called Canaan. Whether we call it a city, we call it a slum area. They took a lot of people in the middle of Port-au-Prince and dumped them in that place on the northern part of the capital, with no resources, no infrastructure. And then the US military gave an award to the general who made that decision. So they packed those people in there, and the people were not being structured in any way. Obviously, the ones with the guns were the ones who eventually established law and order in that community. So once they were able to do that, it was easily for them to infiltrate other parts of the capital, like Matissan, and eventually into the middle class areas. So the other thing also that happened with the death of Maurice, it shows basically how weak the state was overall. And one of the things we have to understand about the weakness of the state, it was a structured organization to weaken the state. The way it was, first, after Mateli ended his reign in 2016, between Mateli 2012 and 2016, there was never any parliamentary elections to renew the mandate of the elected officials, either at the local level or the institutional parliamentary levels. And that was supported by the US ambassador in Haiti. In fact, one of the things that the Haitians in Haiti just learned, began to understand better, is that the US policy in Haiti, even though they spend millions of dollars to educate Haitians about how to vote, they should be participating. But the bottom line, when the Haitians really took that seriously, it was a message to them: don't take it seriously. We just wanted you to teach you, but don't do it. And that's how they ended up having the coup against Aristide and making sure that no parliamentary elections took place during Mateli's reign, even though he was fully supported by the international community. And Mateli was one of the few presidents in modern time who had received more money than any other members of elected officials in Haiti since the fall of Duvalier. The other thing also I think that this gave us with the Jovenel, is that in Haiti, there's always been this ideology between the mulatto and the rural dark-skinned people. So Mateli was seen, in a way, as a mulatto from the middle class population. So he was very well in alliance with the ruling elite, with the international community. So even though this solution was not working anymore, because people realized, the failure of Mateli, and the ruling elite could not really push that anymore. So they decided to bring someone who has no experience in administration, no political experience, like Jovenel, but he was from the rural area. That's why he was known as the neck banana.
Mhm.
Neck banana meaning the banana man. He was a farmer, he was an entrepreneur, but he was dark skinned and he was from the countryside. He was not born in Port-au-Prince. So it was pushing the whole racist ideology and that existed in Haiti from the time of independence between the mulatto and the dark-skinned people. But his killing ended that myth also. So it wasn't anymore a question of, the rural or population or the dark-skinned versus the light-skinned. Both failed in their policy toward governing Haiti. So short of that, what do you do? If they did not bring the gangs, the people would have been on the streets to ask for a total reversal of the political system that exists in Haiti. But having the gangs, and the gangs being supported by the ruling elite primarily, because many of the gang leaders that we know now used to work for the private sector, for the ruling elite, and because of the drug trafficking, the ruling elite no longer control them because they have their own money to buy guns and they can control their own territory. But at the same time, their connections to the ruling elite allowed them to keep the population in check. Today, the gangs are not only ruling on their own, but they're doing a big service to the ruling elite because the minute the population goes on the streets to protest for its democratic rights, for fair wages, for political participation, the gang serves as an enforcer of keeping people in their own corners, in their own situation. So the gangs cannot be viewed only as evil. For the population, they're evil, but for the ruling elite, they keep people in check because the military or whatever the military they have now and the police force they're too small to really control the population. Therefore, they need this process of the gangs who are outlaws, who don't fall under any legal justifications, who are not accountable to anyone, to create havoc and chaos in society so that people will stay where they are. An example of that.
So in all of your responses, could I just say that you've shifted from talking about the international community, which is a broad term, to speaking specifically about US interventions, occupations in Haiti, and US Haitian relations. So let's switch to that topic because this is a very huge context right now. And this makes me think about the next date that is looming in that February 3rd, 2026 is the purported date right now. There are a bunch of legal suits that are making its way up to the courts to end the formal TPS status of the hundreds of thousands of Haitians who came after the earthquake to be deported. So I wanted to ask you a little bit more about kind of shifting geopolitics in the United States. So we've already started talking about the diaspora, or the diaspora, as people also say in Creole, and the ways in which, as political instability, economic instability has ruled its way in Haiti, Haitian immigrants have gone to Canada, to the US, Latin America. So let's talk about these shifting policies. So do you feel as if, what is the role of the diaspora on these possibilities and opportunities and instabilities in Haiti? Have, let's say, recent events in Venezuela shifted anything? And we're also going from an era where we're going from the Monroe Doctrine to the new declaration of the Donroe Doctrine to a certain extent. So what are you seeing in terms of changes in immigration and also potentially changes in the present Trump administration and the possibilities, not just for immigration, but also what's going on within Haiti itself?
Rachel, one of the things that I'm working on right now is that you have over 300,000 Haitians who are at risk of being deported by February 4th because their TPS will end on February 3rd, right? Already, the Trump administration, as soon as it came in power, started to send Haitians back. Now, because of the crisis in Haiti, most of these Haitians ended up in Cap-Haïtien. So the towns in the north and northeast have been saturated with people coming to Cap-Haïtien, and they're given only 1,000 to 5,000 good, which is less than $100, to go back to their local community. Now, most of these people, they come from the south or the Artibonite and those departments and the West, those are the departments that are saturated by gang violence. There's no way they can go there. So already there's an added burden on Haitian society because of the deportees that are coming back to Haiti. Now, not only from Haiti, but also from the Dominican Republic. There are thousands of Haitians that have been deported by the Dominican Republic every month. So therefore, this is an added burden on the TPS. But and the other thing also that's interesting, as we see that Trump has done in South America, Argentina, Chile, where they're supporting right-wing conservative government. The situation right now, February 7th is going to be very important in terms of what kind of government that will take over from the presidential council that is currently in power. And most likely, it's going to be supported by Marco Rubio and the Trump government, but it will be a very conservative element of the ruling elite in Haiti who will probably continue to act on behalf of the American government. For example, imagine that situation that Haiti is right now. The Haitian government has not come out to say that they don't want they cannot receive the deportees or the people right now. They have agreed to accept the Haitians that have been deported, even though they know there are no conditions for these Haitians to reestablish their lives in Haiti. They have no resources, and the government cannot support them. So therefore, I wouldn't be surprised to see that they are going to in lockstep with the Trump administration because we have such a weak government in Haiti that it cannot decide in the interest of the national of the Haitians.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, I mean, you'd think that February 3rd and the ending of temporary protected status and February 7th, these are two kinds of crises that are going to be a pincer. And, Haiti does not have the capacity to absorb the number of people who might be repatriated or deported if TPS ends. As Francois just said, there's something like I don't know, hundreds of thousands, if not a million people who have been deported since 2013 and the denationalization of Dominicans of Haitian descent in the Dominican Republic, which went back, I believe, 3 generations or so to strip people of Haitian descent of citizenship. People who have never even been to Haiti have been sent to Haiti. So you have all these kinds of territories in Haiti that are trying to absorb an influx of people and it just can't do it. So that's going to increase the instability, and the gangs are the only kind of infrastructure at all providing anything. So these people will be kind of captured by the sort of gang networks and territories. I would say just to connect it to Moise and Venezuela as well, I think one of the reasons the US supported Moise is because he did two things the US government asked. He reversed the decision to recognize Maduro as the legitimate government of Venezuela and supported the opposition, and he continued to accept criminal deportees and other deportees from the US. So under Biden, before Trump, this is a long-standing pattern. It's not one particular president that Haiti is always on the receiving end of American empire, regardless of who is in power in the U.S. Um, and I think that's worth highlighting because there's something specific about and beyond all kind of material interests, there's something about the Haiti-US relationship that's different from any other relationship in the region, as much as it is also clearly connected to it. That it's hard to kind of say it any more than what I hear from people in Haiti who say the US simply hates us and hates them for their freedom and hates them for the revolution. That the two countries that are the first two post-colonial states in the New World are kind of both claim a certain exceptionality. The US claims it's above anything else, and whatever it does in the region isn't imperialism because they're always fighting imperialism and bringing self-determination. But that lie was exposed very specifically in 1915 when the US invaded Haiti. And I think just to put it in the context of the Monroe and Dunroe doctrine, I would channel Sabine Lemoore's phrasing that what we see time and again is the 1915 paradigm. What the U.S. invented in the invasion of Haiti, even though they had been in all kinds of other places in the region, in all the other cases, or most of the other cases, the U.S. could claim it was removing a European power. But in the invasion in 1915 of Haiti, there was just no such claim. It was really clear that the U.S. invaded Haiti to restructure it. And I think that has set up a long precedent of how the U.S. operates in Haiti, which is it's fine picking governments in Haiti that reflect U.S. interests and it will continue to do that. And I completely agree that I think we'll see a very hard right government takeover after February 7th, that Marco Rubio will put in place in Haiti something that matches what we see in El Salvador or Ecuador, very hard right-wing governments that will support Trump's deportation plan in order to continue to operate in business as usual mode.
Before we go to the last field, Jeannie, I just want to encourage any of you who are watching this live to, if you want to populate the Q&A with any questions that you may have, would be great. Go ahead.
Yeah, just to echo what my colleagues were saying, it's actually really interesting that this was happening the first few weeks of classes for the semester, and it's rare that in a history class, what you're teaching a student is happening in real time. So we're talking about Manifest Destiny, the Monroe Doctrine, the Roosevelt Quarterly, and as all of this was unfolding in Venezuela, and so I could give the students an actual real world example that you see history is actually relevant to even, contemporary issues. But yes, I would say that just like my colleagues, well, I am trying to not be pessimistic, but it's hard not to be. I think that since Donald Trump got elected, and even during his first term, he did very, very clear that he had a certain vision of America and that this did not include many certain types of migrants. Haiti has been put on lists with countries mostly in the Middle East, pretending that the crisis there is somehow comparable to some countries that are actually war-torn. And Donald Trump has now shied away from saying all kinds of things about different immigrant groups, but more specifically Haitians. I think we all remember the controversy from last year with the vice president and, like his comments about the Haitians eating cats in Springfield. Donald Trump also repeating this during a debate with Kamala Harris during the presidential election. And so I think it's very clear that this long tradition, as Craig was saying while quoting Sabine Lamour about this 1915 paradigm, the Haitian always being otherized, Haiti representing another type of liberty, is something that we're very much seeing, and that Donald Trump is very much, making sure is kept alive. I think that it's very clear that Haitians are seen as undesirable types of migrants. You see this a lot when you listen to any type of right-wing pundits. I mean, right now they're kind of out of Haitians back. It's more the Somali population that seems to be the big focus on a lot of those conversations. But I would say that even beyond the US, there's a lot of fear here in Canada where I live, especially in Quebec, because there's a sense that as TPS is going to end, Canada and mostly Quebec is going to be flooded by a Haitian migration. Last year, there was a major in April of last year, there's a major controversy with Quebec's Premier François Legault and also the province minister of immigration, François Roberge, who said that Quebec could not, to quote him, "Le Québec ne peut pas accueillir la misère du monde." So Quebec cannot welcome the misery of the world. Everyone knew he was speaking about Haitians. It was very clear. So even here in Canada, which is supposed to be this very friendly country, there's a major fear of unregulated Haitian migration. But more generally, there is a fear of Quebec becoming brown or becoming blacker because of this Haitian migration. Even though a certain type of Haitians who came here and here being Quebec in the 1960s are very much celebrated for being Haitian intellectuals and whatnot. They assimilated well. There's very much a sense that the newer Haitians who are coming are not desirable. And if they're not wanted in the US, there's no reason why they should be wanted here in Quebec. So what is happening with TPS is going to have ramifications throughout the Americas as, ways of Haitian migrants are going to be unfortunately flooding different countries where they don't necessarily always have the capacity to actually welcome Haitians, nor do they want to. I think we've seen that with a lot of the leaders from the West Indies in the last few weeks who have spoken about being willing to accept Black migrants, but specifically non-Haitians, So I always say this to people that even if there's a very specific type of anti-Haitianism in the Dominican Republic and in the US, but anti-Haitianism is really something that is hemispheric, it's much larger than just the US and the Dominican Republic. So I do think it's important as we speak about the US and what's going on with TPS and any kind of protections that might have been granted to Haitians, that we also keep in mind that this is causing a crisis in the entire region, really. So yeah.
And I just wanted to echo that I think that anti-Haitianism is such an important point because Haiti kind of suffers from the anti-Blackness that is the part of white supremacy that we see behind Manifest Destiny more broadly. And then there's a specificity of anti-Haitianness, which has a symbolic import well beyond other kinds of structural racism, I think, so that it's very like so that things can be done to Haiti that you can't politically get away with doing in your own country, or at least used to be the case. And so there's a kind of symbolism to the cruelty of what's done to Haiti, or the exceptionality that's played out in Haiti, that is sometimes told about domestic politics as well as about things that are happening in Haiti.
And then I wonder, Francois, you were talking about countries such as Chile, Mexico, Brazil also having many Haitian migrants. What are their thoughts or fears or anxieties about the ending of TPS status in the US?
It's interesting to see that Haitians in Chile, contrary to some common beliefs, were very well received in Chile compared to the Dominican Republic. In Chile, they were given, residency quite fast. A lot of employers want to hire Haitians because they said they are disciplined, they're hard workers, and then they follow the rules. As I spoke to some Haitians there, you won't find them at bars, you won't find them in any place that is quote unquote illegal. All they care about is work, take care of their family, and then send money back home. And then because of the social programs that exist in Chile, and given Chile's historical past, they are more welcome to immigrants than, let's say, the Dominican Republic, which is basically always hounding the Haitians, mistreat them, beat them up, or even kill them. Now, obviously, we have to understand also that there are 19 million citizens in Chile, and you only have about 200,000 Haitians. And in some places, there were novelty. People wanted to take pictures with them because they've never seen, Black people before, or, it was something of a novelty. However, as they began to build a critical mass, there was some resistance to it. And right now, the new government that's coming up, which is a very conservative government, is already using the languages that Trump has been using of deporting people, cutting off some of the social programs that they are in, and limiting their access to migrate with their family to Chile. But overall, one of the things I saw in Chile is that the Haitians who came, interesting thing, many of them are educated. Some of them were college graduates, university graduates in Haiti, and then they decided to move to Chile. So therefore, they had some social capital that allowed them, because they spoke Spanish, so they had a legs up in terms of economic opportunities. The second thing also is that many of them came in with I would say in the context of Haiti, they were middle class because they had to sell property, land, or borrow money to make the trip. At the beginning, Chile did not need you did not need a visa to go to Chile as long as you can pay for the airfare. But right now they have changed, the government has changed that. You need a visa to migrate to Chile. But the social programs are very generous in terms of what Haitians can obtain in Chile. So therefore, it is, the only thing they worry about, it's very cold sometimes, and that is not a great migration place for them compared to the Caribbean or the Dominican Republic. However, in terms of economic opportunities, it seems like it's a better place for them than the Dominican Republic, which is next across, the border with Haiti.
We could turn to questions of hope and the possibility of renewal. So I think about two kind of polar opposites of images about Haiti in popular culture. So one is the movie Wakanda Forever, that I'm sure many people have seen. And in that movie, where you have this fictional African kingdom where there's no colonialism, there's this wealth that they own called vibranium. It's amazing that Cap-Haïtien, my hometown, is like the place of refuge. And I'm sorry for any of you who have not seen the end. Always at a Marvel movie, you must stay past the credits. There's this scene at the end where you watch who is the future king of Rwanda watching up on a beach. And again, we are in Cap-Haïtien, and his name is Louverture. So there's still this idea in the kind of global Black imaginary, again, of Haiti as this place of hope, of tremendous hope and possibility. And at the same time, we've also spent the past few minutes talking about the tremendous chaos, instability, corruption that's also going on. So I want to, and then the other thing that I should say is in this course that I'm teaching called Haiti, Past, Present, and Futures, I'm actually tasking with the students with social innovation. So their final assignment is actually to think about all of the knowledge that they've learned and to build something, an entity, whether it's an organization, institution, a law, to scale it up, to price it, to talk how they're going to get buy-in for it, that's going to address these pressing problems. So I want us to forecast, I want you all to become fortune tellers to a certain extent. And let's say it is January 1st, 2026, when Haiti is celebrating the 225th anniversary of this nation. And I've heard you talk about, even in your research, when you've talked about infrastructure, democracy, civics, this idea that there are groups on the ground, there are people within the country and those who've had to migrate for involuntary reasons, who are middle class, who are educated, who see a future for themselves. And you've also talked about last Virginie, you talked about how people want to return. There's nobody that people, few people go thinking they'll never go back to their country. And also talk about economic possibilities. So in order for some of these currents to change, for there to be governance and nation, for there to be the possibilities of greater economic productivity, from what you've seen from the groups of people you've talked to, whether they are in Haiti, not in Haiti, what are the possible tools, policies, and actions that could result in better governance and thriving of everyday people? That's a big question, I know.
Mhm. Lindsay, do you want to go first?
No, I was actually going to defect to the two of you simply because I feel like, well, I fear that perhaps I don't have the most optimistic outview of this. Rachel, I think we've spoken about this. I said in one of our email conversations, um, I don't want to be predicting the future, and I know that's not exactly what you're asking, and it's kind of part of the exercise and it's all fun and dandy. But part of it is because, to be very honest, when I speak to people, when I look at Haiti today, um, I don't want that narrative if things can't change and that it's the Haitian habitus to always be in this continuous state of crisis, not just since 1986, but really since the independence. Sometimes you talk to people and that's kind of how they frame Haitian history as if crisis was almost something that was pathological and, very unique to Haitians. So this is something I very much try to react against. In my own work, in my own life and whatnot. But it's also very hard for me to be here and to honestly say that I have enough. Maybe it's my own lack of imagination, in the sense that I'm thinking the things that would need to be done, the scale at which it would need to be done, the fact that there isn't any state, the fact that the civil society exists, but it's very, very fragile, the fact that so much of the middle class is no longer in Haiti, the fact that gangs that were supported by elites today seem to have escaped the control of those elites. All those things makes it hard for me to think of like a clear path forward. That's just looking at Haiti without thinking about all those other international forces, that are also at play. So maybe I'm not the best person to react right now. Maybe in light of what my other colleagues are going to say, I'll be like, well, I should have seen that. Maybe I'm too blinded by the fact that, especially when I talk to Haitians who are in Haiti, um, I think the tone is much different than when I talk to a lot of Haitians who are in the diaspora and who almost feel like it's their responsibility to speak about the fact that Haiti can change and Haiti will change, not just because they want to go back to Haiti. I think part of it, from what I can see, if I'm being honest, is also it's a reaction to what a lot of Westerners are saying and the way that Haiti is often presented. There's a sense of it's their responsibility to show that Haiti is not just that narrative, that Haiti has been more and Haiti is more and Haiti can be more. But when you speak to a lot of Haitians in Haiti who have to live that violence every single day, it's about finding smaller things to be happy and to hold on to and to survive. But there's very much a sense that the state has failed, and it's very hard, at least when I speak to the people I speak to kind of imagine how to move forward from that. So I'm very sorry. I know that's not at all what you're asking. But I was trying to be honest. But like I said, I can't wait to hear what my other colleagues have to say. Maybe it's going to speak to my own blind spot and the fact that, yeah, I do feel, I mean, I'm saying this sitting in a position of extreme privilege, but I do feel exhausted. I do feel exhausted in the sense of how do we I mean, I guess I'm asking the question back to everyone, like, how do we get out of this, you know?
And I should say that
Well,
one person in the Q&A has, I think, brought some possibilities with that, in that they ask, how have Haitians remade and reformulated a sense of community and belonging, even with all this context of earthquake, failed states, damaging policies? And how do those actions that people are doing in building community suggesting patterns for the future of Haiti? So maybe that will help us out a little bit.
yeah. I'm an eternal optimist, and probably I am older than many all of you here on the screen. And I've been organizing, working on Haitians either in New York or in Haiti since I was 18. And I had the privilege of sitting around with people who were exiled by Duvalier, union leaders, great poets and writers, political party members, and they gave me this love of for Haiti that, even though I've been in the US for over 54 years now, that has never gotten out of my system. I'm currently working in the North and Northeast Haiti with a lot of community groups to an organization called Faith in Action, where we work with 74 community groups in the Northeast and in the North. What are they doing? They're working on agriculture, they work on civic education, and they work on mutual solidarity. And one of the things that's always fascinates me about these people, how do you hold on? That question you just mentioned, Virginie, Melanie, how do you hold on in such a despair situation? And two things that made that, I would say, make that happen. First, their faith. Their faith, they have deep sense of faith that, and the other thing is that they are very well aware that their conditions is not of their own making. There are outside forces out there that has tried, every time they try something to get out of the situation, the outside forces come in and try to stop it. And third, they have in a situation where they have never chosen their own leaders. They never had the opportunity to choose the people they really want to govern them. Other forces would come in and prevent them from doing it. But the other thing also, I think it's a deep sense of nationalism, a deep sense of identity, who they are, the struggle the ancestors went through to get them that piece of land. And that's why in the psyche of Haitians, their mind, the land is the most important part of their life. It doesn't matter how big the land or how small it is, they need a piece of land because that land was given to them by their forebears, not out of a struggle. And the idea of keeping on that land and taking possession of it, or making sure that other generations can have some of it, means it's a form of independence. When the American occupation came in 1915, they tried to nationalize or privatize the lands like they did in the Dominican Republic to create huge estates and for the sugarcane. One of the things, the resistance they found in Haiti, they could never get the Haitians to come together and privatize large swaths of land in order to do commercial agriculture. Haitians resisted to it, and that's why you had the Kako movement, Ushama Peralt, and you have a historical presence of resistance. And sometimes it's passive resistance. They know that they don't have the guns, they don't have the intelligence system, they don't have the technology to fight you directly, but passively, they're going to resist. And sooner or later, you're going to give up on them because you don't, as some foreigners say, oh, we don't understand you Haitians. No, the Haitians understand themselves. The thing is that when you are imposing things on them they don't like, they have to find a way to say no, but knowing full well if they say directly they don't like it, you're going to kill them, like you did with Shamai Pirat, like you did with various other leaders in the past. So therefore, my optimism is coming from the fact that when I see so many young scholars, Haitian Americans, or great friends like Greg Beckett, who is right here, looking at Haiti and looking at it in a different lens. And then I see a lot of Haitians in the diaspora who are more interested in Haiti right now than they were before, and trying to do the research and understanding the context and keep passing on the story. The most important thing about this whole thing we're doing is letting the young generation know that Haiti had a glorious past. Haiti had a lot of difficulties, but at the same time, its population never gave up on it. Never at any time. Anytime I go to those places, I see weddings, first communions. At night, you have the Vodou Drum, people celebrating. You have, when you have a funeral, you have the whole community coming out for the funeral. You have a woman taking care of all the children in their own community. If the woman, the mother goes to shop, and then they come together to do things collectively at a point where, just imagine, you have only 12,000 police officers in Haiti. Of a population of 12 million, you would have thought New York City has over 40,000 police officers for a population of 8 million. Just imagine what happens in a country like that. There would have been killings all over the communities if Haitians didn't understand the dilemma that they've been put in and how to address it so that they can survive. So things are bleak. Yes, they are bleak, and they're going to be worse for February 7th, because the forces that are controlling the political process in Haiti don't want Haitians to come together and decide for themselves, because they're not allowing Haitians to choose their own leaders, to choose their own path, and to choose their own alternative. It's going to take a while, but I'm sure that it will change. So that's why I always have that hope.
Yeah, I do want to let Craig speak, but can I quickly react to two things that Francois said? The first one being that you said Haiti had a glorious past and great leaders. But I do wonder, I was having this conversation with an older Haitian gentleman recently who said, but is Toussaint, Dessalines, and Christophe really going to help us today? We keep talking about the Haitian Revolution, but today in 2026, is that really what's going to help us? Is that really what's going to move us forward as a country, as a people who are now spread around the world, you know? And as much as I do believe that hope is important, I mean, obviously, I wouldn't be studying Haitian history if I thought Haiti was hopeless. You know, I wouldn't be studying the history of a country that has no past and I don't think has any future. But I can't help to come back to that question, you know. We always talk about the Haitian Revolution, and the Haitian Revolution was important. It is, you know, one of the most important moments of this age of revolutions, and one of the most important moments in, you know, in recent history period, obviously. But still, I wonder, like, we always go back to that, and that because that it's almost that's the thing that we have. And so, as much as I want to be hopeful, and I'm realizing I'm not going anywhere in my comment here, but I guess what I'm trying to say is that I'm very, in French, c'est partagé. Je suis très partagé. Je suis très I'm divisé. I'm conflicted. That's the word I was looking for. I'm very much conflicted because as much as I want to hope, and hope is necessary, and if there's no hope, there's no reason to think about moving forward and what's the point of life and whatnot. But I do think that always resurrecting the Haitian Revolution, this glorious past, does that actually do anything when you look at what the country looks like in terms of its infrastructure, when you look at literacy rates, when you look at any type of human indicator of, you know, that would tell you something about progress. We could argue until the end of next week that, well, these are Western construct. They don't really speak to the situation in Haiti. We know Haiti is a country in crisis. We can't deny that, you know? And so this is where I feel very much conflicted, and I don't know what to say when people ask me, well, what do you think is going to happen in Haiti? I just revert to well, I'm an historian, so I don't answer that question. So yes, I guess I wanted to react to those two things that you said.
Yeah, I mean, Virginia, I feel like I share some of your bleakness, and I think, you know, hope is a stance we have to take up, and I feel, especially as someone who feels incredibly privileged to have been welcomed into communities in Haiti, that's not like I can't give up on, it'd be a luxury to kind of give up on Haiti in some sense because I can leave it. But I think that, you know, in the short term, I think we need to think of the questions of the futures over some different temporalities. You know, next week or two, we have some big deadlines coming and things are going to get worse before they get better. Obviously, there has to be some sort of political solution and rebuilding some sort of institutions of governance in Haiti. Obviously, you have to deal with the gangs, and I do not have any clue how to put that genie back into the bottle. Those gangs have a lot of money, a lot of firepower, a lot of strength. They're not going to give it up. It pains me to even suggest it, but that there's probably got to be some sort of compromise with them, a political solution. You can't just go in and fight them because you'd have to kind of kill everybody. That'd be terrible. So in the short term, things seem bleaker to me than ever. But I want to kind of go back to what I do think there is this way we always go back to the revolution. Rolf Trio called the revolution an unthinkable event, even as it happened. And I love that language, not only because it exposes the limits of conceptual thinking for Enlightenment thinkers who couldn't imagine people who had been enslaved proclaiming their own freedom, but also because it just reminds us that the unthinkable happens all the time. Maybe not all the time, but it has happened in the past and it can happen in the future. But for me, what I think is really important is thinking about what the revolution set out in Haiti. And there's a lot of things that came out of the revolution, some good, some bad. One of them is a model of a post-colonial state where political sovereignty and territorial sovereignty became a framework. And Haiti is a touchstone for people. That's why you see it in Wakanda. And it's a touchstone for Caribbean intellectuals who don't like Haitians, but like Haitian history, or even France might embrace the revolution, but not, they love Toussaint, but they don't like Dessalines, right? Um, so there's ways in which the revolution stands for a bunch of different things, but I also think there's a way in which something came out of the revolution that isn't about the state. The state came a little bit later after an army. The Army of Independence began to build a state, but it tried to build plantations again and do export production, and it had to negotiate for political recognition, and it became compromised by debt. And that story of post-colonial debt is a long one, and Haiti is a good template for understanding how imperialism works after independence. But there's also something else that happened, is that people who were no longer enslaved decided and made decisions about how they wanted to live. Jean Casimir calls this the counter-plantation model, which is to say that this goes back to the 1915 Keiko movement too, the refusal to do as much as you can, refusal to work for wages on sugarcane plantations. Now, many Haitians migrate to do that in South Florida or the Dominican Republic, but they do that in order to buy land back in Haiti to grow coffee and to grow tomatoes and to grow onions and to raise chickens and to have their families there. There's a model in the kind of reconstructed peasantry that came after the plantation that I think is where you see all these actually living democratic practices in Haiti. They're not super, there's a lot of gender inequality in those social structures and age stratification to be sure, but people who want to make decisions in a community about how they're going to live. That to me is always been the model of a kind of non-state politics in Haiti that's blocked by the state. That's what the international community blocks when it becomes a popular movement centered around the language of democracy. But I think what I want to start to get a better theory of is that a Haitian theory of politics that's from that kind of intimate local level. I think Haitian scholars have been trying to write that for a long time. And I think if we tap into that and don't try to think, how do we build a democratic institution, or how do you have to support parliament, or you have to do all kinds of specific things in Haiti, but I think how do you let people live their lives in a way that they're in control of? After the earthquake, the big talk was decentralization. It didn't happen. And I think that's key to any political future in Haiti is a massive decentralization. I'm not, as I said, I'm not a hopeful guy, but if I wanted to get back to the questions and think about hope, why can't Haiti become a revolutionary paradigm again for whatever comes after the state? Maybe it doesn't have to be crisis. Like maybe there's some other politics besides the nation state that we're going to enter into in a new world. I don't know what that is. And so that's a bit of the bright side version. But to give the sort of to get back at that practice of what we could do. After the earthquake, again, the international community was raising $5 or $6 billion or something like that got pledged to Haiti, and it got mismanaged, of course. But there was a moment when people began in Haiti to say, "Why don't you just get that money to Haitians? Don't give it to NGOs. Don't give it to the state. If you divided up 5 billion by the 13 million people in Haiti or whatever it is, and gave them money, every one of them would start a business and buy some land and invest or migrate, and it would have done something completely transformative. And of course, it didn't happen. And of course, it's unthinkable that you would do that because the West thinks that development is something that has to be done to people, that Haitians have to be taught about democracy or markets as if they don't do those things every day. So I think part of that, what needs to happen in Haiti is just shifting the international framework that blocks so many things from thriving in Haiti. of course, there's just real pragmatic things too of how to stop the gangs from killing people and displacing them. I don't know, but in a longer term, if we can get through that hurdle, resetting the international community's relationship to a state or a non-state or a community in Haiti.
Well, this has been an extraordinary conversation. And as much as we've been talking about a nation and the idea of nationalism, in the US, since Martin Luther King Day was just celebrated a couple of weeks ago, there's a speech that I had not heard him say. It was called The False God of Nationalism. So this has not been a conversation about nationalism, but one of the things he had said in that speech is that patriotism is holding your country accountable. So we've already seen the sense of that from what you all have shared with us. And also, I just want to close up by reminding that the motto on the Haitian flag is "L'union fait la force," that in unity there is strength. And here's where there are certainly tendrils of that that are demonstrating themselves. And we will see what the future holds from there. So thank you all so very much. And thank you all of you for watching this and participating in this conversation.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Good evening, everyone.
Okay. All right. Bye.
I
Bye.
feel like we didn't get to the questions, but I thank you so much,
Yeah.
Rochelle and Virginie, and I think Francois already gone, but and everyone who made this possible, thank you. I really appreciate.
Yeah, thank you so much for the invitation.
My goodness, that was such a thought-provoking, rich conversation. I'm so glad we recorded it because I'd love to go back and listen to it again. Thank you for your really generative discussion.
Yeah, and then so just before I go, Greg and Virginie, I'm going to follow up with you about putting on a conference at CDCA with funding, but I'll send you an email so we can start to talk about it. Thank you, Jisha. Thank you
Thank you
so
so
much.
much for
And
doing
Michelle,
this.
some other time when we can talk
Have a
more, I'd
nice
love to
afternoon.
hear what your students come up with for
Yes.
those projects.
Yes.
That sounds like a fascinating assignment, and
Yeah.
leave
Yeah.
it to their age to give us the hope we need.
Yeah, because I've told them to solve Haiti's problems in one
I love it.
quarter, so we'll see.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you.
All right.
Take care. Good night. Bye.
Bye.